For 500 years, the galaxy thought it knew the score. The Kelnarii were the diplomats. The Vex were the builders. The Kahar Imperium were the warriors, the big stick that kept the peace, however brittle. And humanity? Humanity was a ghost story, a bad memory, a species that clawed its way to the stars, only to be judged as too chaotic, too broken, and unceremoniously shoved back into the shadows of their lonely solar system. They were a footnote, presumed to have faded into extinction, that history and the 5 centuries of arrogance it created was about to be rewritten in fire and silence. The galaxy was about to learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. They were about to discover the terrifying answer to an old human question, the Fermi paradox. And that answer was humanity itself. In the heart of Kahar territory, it was supposed to be a day of triumph. Grand Admiral Vorlag, a creature whose entire species was defined by conquest, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Pride of Vorlag. Before him floated a fleet of 2,000 warships, the absolute peak of Kahar power, ready to crush a rebellious planet. Trillions were watching the broadcast, a spectacle meant to remind everyone who was in charge. And then, something impossible happened. A patch of space that every sensor insisted was empty, a void colder than the space between galaxies flickered. And out of that impossible nothing, a single ship appeared. To really get the universe-shattering shock of that moment, you have to understand the Kahar. They evolved on a paradise world, with no real predators and all the resources they could want. Their entire psychology was built on entitlement. They saw themselves as the natural masters of a galaxy that had just been waiting for them to show up and bring order. When they first met humanity centuries ago, they saw a species born from pure chaos, a death world species. They saw a history of constant war, planetary disasters, and a desperate, clawing struggle just to exist. They didn't see resilience. They saw a defect. So, along with the rest of the Galactic Council, they decided a species that fought itself so much could never be a stable part of the galactic community. They cut humanity off, strangled them with sanctions, and made sure they were completely isolated. For 500 years, humanity was simply forgotten, written off as a failed experiment. Grand Admiral Vorlag was the living embodiment of this arrogance. He was the product of 1,000 victories against enemies who fought with predictable tactics and tech. His fleet, the Indomitable Will, was a masterpiece of conventional, overwhelming force. Singularity cores for power, layers of energized shielding, and plasma cannons that could splinter continents. So, when Vorlag looked at the lone, unknown ship, he didn't feel fear. He felt insulted. How dare this insignificant speck interrupt his grand display? It was an affront to the very idea of the Imperium. On the bridge, his sub-commander's mandibles clicked nervously. Sensors are blank, Grand Admiral. It has no energy signature, no drive plume, no registry. It's just there. Vorlag sneered, a gravelly rumble in his chest. A ghost? A wreck? It doesn't matter. It's in my way. Erase it. The command was given. Across 2,000 warships, gunners prepared to unleash a storm of energy that could snuff out a star. It was a simple calculation of overwhelming force. An equation that had never, ever failed them. But today, the math was about to be very, very wrong. The human vessel just hung there. It didn't react. A sliver of pure black against a sea of stars. Compared to the ornate, muscle-bound designs of the Kahar, this ship was brutally simple. A long, dagger-shaped craft, with a hull that seemed to swallow the light around it, giving off no reflection, no gleam. Faint red lines, like glowing scars, traced patterns across its surface. There were no visible gun ports, no engine lights, no fancy bridge window. It was a weapon trying very hard to look like it wasn't one. It was the UNS Retribution.AS. The Kahar crews locked their weapons. A new alert shrieked across every console in their fleet. It wasn't an attack. It was a shutdown. All at once, across 2,000 Kahar warships, everything just died. The roaring singularity cores that powered their civilization winked out. The humming shields collapsed. The holographic displays dissolved into static, plunging every bridge into the dim, terrifying glow of emergency chemical lights. The Indomitable fleet, the pride of the galaxy's most feared empire, was suddenly cold, dark, and completely helpless. Now, a remote shutdown of an entire battle fleet like this. That's the kind of technology that goes beyond mere engineering and straight into the realm of rewriting physics. On the bridge of the Pride of Vorlag, chaos erupted. Officers yelled contradictory reports. Engineers screamed that their cores weren't broken. They were just off, as if someone flipped a switch from 1,000,000 kilometers away. Vorlag stood frozen, his mind refusing to process the tactical impossibility. His instrument of absolute power had been neutered without a single shot fired, and in that dead silence, the human ship finally spoke. Aboard the UNS Retribution, there was no panic, just a deep 500-year-old calm. On the command deck, less a bridge and more a dark sphere of holographic data. Commander Aaron Hale watched the Kahar fleet go dark. His face, lit by the soft red tactical display, was a mask of cold resolve. He and his crew were the children of a promise made 20 generations ago. When humanity was cast out, they didn't wither. They hid, they watched, and they listened. From the shadows of their lonely system, they observed the galaxy, their existence the most closely guarded secret in history. They saw the Council's stagnation, the Kahar's brutality, and the slow rot of a galactic order built on lazy arrogance. They saw storms coming that the great powers, in their comfort, were completely blind to, and so, humanity prepared. They transformed their entire society into a single-purpose machine to become the galaxy's final shield, whether the galaxy wanted them or not. It turns out, humanity's violent past wasn't a flaw. It was their greatest weapon. Being children of a death world gave them a unique gift for ruthless strategy and adaptation. While the Kahar mastered the hammer, humanity mastered the scalpel, the virus, and the ghost. They didn't just improve their technology, they changed their entire understanding of physics. They had to break every rule just to survive, and in doing so, they learned how to rewrite them. Commander Hale was the final product of that 500-year project. His mind held every battle the Kahar had ever fought. He knew Vorlag's playbook better than Vorlag did. He knew that you don't beat a bully by meeting them on the battlefield. You take the field away from them. They're broadcasting a system-wide distress call, his comms officer reported, her voice perfectly steady. Let them, Hale said, his eyes fixed on the main display. The galaxy needs to watch. They need to understand why we were quiet for so long. He'd waited for this exact moment. Not some random skirmish, but a public spectacle of Kahar aggression. He needed witnesses. He needed the whole galaxy to see the Imperium for what it was and humanity for what it had become. The flagship is trying to reignite its auxiliary fusion reactors, the tactical officer noted. Weapons are still cold, but they're trying to charge a forward kinetic launcher. Hale almost smiled. So predictable. Even when faced with the impossible, the Kahar instinct was to just reach for a bigger gun. It's time, Hale said softly. Broadcast the message, and prepare the erasure. Across every major homeworld, on every public screen and deep into the psychic networks of telepathic species, the Kahar's broadcast was hijacked. The image of the helpless, dark fleet was suddenly stamped with the sigil of the United Nations, of solace symbol nobody had seen for half a millennium. And then came the voice, calm, male, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was Commander Aaron. Hail to the civilizations of this galaxy. We are humanity. For 500 years, you believed we were gone. You were wrong. We have been watching. We have seen your triumphs and your follies. We have watched as empires built on pride preyed upon the weak. We have seen the Galactic Council become a bastion of stagnation and appeasement. The voice echoed in the halls of power on 100 worlds. This era of galactic ignorance is over. The Kahar Imperium and all who follow their path are a cancer. Today, we're cutting it out. We offer no treaty. We make no demands. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to save you from yourselves. The balance of power was always a lie. Today, we are the new variable. We are humanity. We are the final shield. This is our one and only warning. On the Pride of Vorlag, Grand Admiral Vorlag listened with pure, unadulterated fury. To be lectured by a ghost? By a species his ancestors wrote off as failed primitives? Unthinkable. His ship's auxiliary power was flickering on. One kinetic cannon had a trickle of power. It was a pathetic Hail Mary shot. But Kahar arrogance could not suffer such a public humiliation. Fire! Vorlag bellowed. Fire that weapon now! A single, massive slug of metal launched from the flagship, a desperate, angry punch thrown into the void. The Retribution didn't move. It didn't put up a shield. The slug was meters from its hull when it simply stopped existing. No impact. No flare of energy. One moment it was there, the next it was just gone. Commander Hale's expression never changed. They chose to answer our warning with violence. So be it, execute, and finally, the retribution showed its teeth. From its bow, a tiny bubble of distorted reality began to form. It wasn't light or energy. It was a localized space-time paradox. A weapon that doesn't destroy things, but simply erases their existence from the timeline. No debris, no radiation, no explosion, just a clean, surgical removal from reality. The bubble expanded with impossible speed, washing over the pride of Vorlag. Grand Admiral Vorlag had just enough time for his eyes to widen in cosmic horror. His ship didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It, and every soul aboard, was simply unmade. One moment, the flagship of the indomitable will was there. The next, there was only empty space. The galaxy, watching live, saw a 2-kilometer-long dreadnought vanish as if it were just a bad dream. The bubble pulsed again, and a dozen more Kaha cruisers were wiped from existence. And again. And again. This wasn't a battle. It was a deletion. A methodical, silent, and terrifyingly efficient extermination. The effect was instantaneous. On Kelnerii, the silver-tongued diplomats fell silent for the first time in their recorded history. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, representatives stared at their screens, trembling. The very same powers who had mocked and exiled humanity were now faced with a force they couldn't even begin to comprehend. They had been afraid of humanity's penchant for war, but they expected something. They understood. Fleets clashing, planets burning. They did not expect this cold, silent, physics-breaking horror. It's one thing to fear a barbarian with a club. It's another thing entirely to fear a god who can erase you from thought itself. Shock quickly turned into a galaxy-spanning terror. On 1,000 worlds, military leaders who had never known fear ordered their fleets to stand down, suddenly realizing their best weapons were nothing more than sharpened sticks. The phrase Deathworld species was no longer an insult. It was whispered with a new and profound dread. Humanity wasn't just resilient. It was transcendent. It was a predator that had been evolving in the dark while everyone else got fat and slow in the light, and then came the truly chilling thought: the UNS Retribution was just one ship. The message was, we are humanity, not I am the Retribution. The implication was terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a desperate last stand. This was a coming out party. This was humanity announcing that they hadn't just built a ship, they had built a civilization on this new, terrifying level. The old balance of power wasn't just shifted. It was revealed to have been an illusion all along. The silent destruction of the Kaha fleet echoes across the cosmos, leaving behind a vacuum of power and a million questions. Humanity has finally shown its hand, and the entire galaxy is holding its breath. So, what do you think happens next? Does the Galactic Council bow down and beg for protection from the species they once scorned? Do the other empires try to unite against this impossible new power? Let me know your theories in the comments. What would you do if you just watched humanity return? The event forever known as Vorlag's Folly was over in less than an hour. Of the 2,000 warships in the Kaha fleet, only a few scout ships on the edge of the battle were spared, left alive to carry the story. The UNS Retribution didn't stay for a victory lap. Once the message was sent and the price was paid, it simply folded space and vanished, returning to whatever hidden fortress it called home. It left behind a broken galaxy. The Kaha Imperium, its military decapitated and its pride shattered, began to collapse within days as its subject worlds rose up in rebellion. The Galactic Council was thrown into chaos, its authority exposed as a paper-thin lie. Every major power was forced to look in the mirror and re-evaluate its place in the universe. They had been living in a comfortable, well-lit room, completely unaware that a Leviathan had been watching them from the darkness outside the entire time. Humanity's 500 years of silence were over. They hadn't just decloaked a ship, they had decloaked a truth that could never be ignored again. The children of Earth had returned to the stars, not as equals, but as arbiters. The age of galactic ignorance was over, ended in fire, silence, and blood. The game had changed, and the galaxy would now have to learn a terrifying new set of rules.